Okay, so what we're going to do here is set the pitch, and the pitch is ideally intended to help with ensuring when the gun recoils, it stays positioned in your shoulder. And I'm going to set this pitch at about 2.5 to 3 inches in there. It's a 32-inch barrel. And what you'll do is you'll stand this gun up against the wall where the top of the receiver is touching the wall. And at that point, then you're going to measure the distance between the wall and the barrel. And what I did was, on this particular stock, I made this stock longer, and I've got 13. Doesn't really show up here very well. For my measurements, I'm right about there for my length of pull. And so what I first have to do is, this is when the gun's sitting there, I basically just measured from the floor up, the toe, how high the toe came up. So what I'll do is I'll trim this from this point down to here to get my pitch, and then using the line that I have here for my length of pull, I'll have my pitch, and now then what I'll do is I'll just trim that again to my length of pull. Okay. You know, the miter saw that I have, this is a 10-inch Sears miter saw, and if I were buying one today, I would not buy this one. I'd buy a 10. I'd definitely buy Sears, but I buy the one that had the saw that slides out in this direction. You'll notice, in order to get this to fit the way I needed to work with it, I took the backstop off and basically just created another backstop and used that hole, tilted it over, and this is going to work fine. For the 90 degrees, you'll notice what I did was I had just some shims here. You'll want to shim under here that when you cut this doesn't drop down, this stays in place. And then I'm just using a 90 degree here to get this. So from here we'll go ahead and cut, and then you'll notice I've got my length of pull here. Once we double check our pitch and we're still 90 degrees square here, then we can go ahead and draw our line and go ahead and cut for our length of pull. But this was part of one of the steps I was talking to you earlier about, was I always make these a little bit longer so that I have the room to go ahead and adjust the pitch and then finally come back in and do my length of pull. Alright, so now we're going to do the butt pad. Pretty straightforward process. All I did was I used my butt pad to get my measurements. You'll notice I came down just a little bit. For my measurements, I wanted about 2.5, 2 3/8 down here. So I lowered my butt pad just a little bit, and that's why. From here then I just measured the center, and then measured the center, drew a line, dimpled where my holes are going to be, and then I fixed it with these screws. These are number 8s. I use a dimple with a 3/16. It'll fit right through there. That'll be a 3/16, but do not drill 3/16. You're going to drill with a 7/64. And the only other thing here to make note of, I guess, is to kind of be aware of, right, these screws, there is a difference. They look the same, but a wood screw and a machine screw, they almost look identical. The difference is going to be the pitch on these threads. So be very, very careful if you're going to replace one of these screws, or you go to the hardware store and you get another one of these, make sure the pitch or the distance between these threads is for a wood screw. Otherwise, you will strip all these threads out of here. If you do that, options are you could go a little bit longer, or you could use epoxy or glass bed to fill that in, or even you could drill that out, put a dowel in there and then use epoxy to stick it in there, and then re-drill that dowel, and then you'll be good to go. So, or you could even do a metal insert and thread it to put in there. I've seen a lot of folks do that as well. So that's really the only thing here on these screws, is make sure you're getting a wood screw, and then you ought to be good to go. Okay, now we finished with the butt pad, and what we're looking for is a very good, nice fit going around these edges. And so the butt pad, when I first put it on there, the areas that extended over the wood, I just used a belt sander and 80 grit and grinded it down, being very careful not to touch the wood. You just get it close and you'll finish the rest by hand. I like to have my butt pads follow this line, and so when you're coming down to the edge, be sure and just keep the angles that you're wanting for your toe. And so what I'll do now is, just review a couple of things when you're cutting this wood. Sometimes during the vibration, the wood can move a little bit, and you might have a little bit of a gap. That's another picky area for me. I don't like gaps here at all. And so let's review a couple of things that you can do to make sure that if you do get some gaps, some things that have worked for me. All right, so the first thing you're going to do is go ahead, and I'm using a 220 grit Norton sandpaper. This 3M paper, I really don't like the 3M paper. It has this sticky stuff on the back of this. When you put this in your handheld sanders, this actually ends up becoming a glue, I guess, from the heat, and it actually ends up sticking. So I really don't like this sandpaper, and I won't buy 3M again. What I do is you'll see when you have the butt pad on there, you'll see the areas that are high. But what I do is to start with is I lay it flat. Just make sure you've got a good flat surface. With my left hand over here on the side, I'm holding the sandpaper down, and I'll just gently drag this. And what you're looking for is to make sure if you've got a wobble in this, you're just wanting to stay on that edge. And I'll just drag it, and or I'll swivel it just like this. One of the things you want to be careful about is on the sandpaper, you don't want it to sort of ski up, right? If the paper skis up like this, what will happen is you'll start rounding off this edge, and that's what I'm referring to as sort of skiing up. And that actually ends up making it worse. And so when you do that, you'll end up seeing where there's a high spot. So this is one direction, a sliding direction like this, and when you're finished, you're just going to pick it up, come back over, and you're going to slide down again. All right. The other thing that you can do is, again, I'm just using 220 grit. I've got a piece of, this is a piece of oak. And what I do is I'll just take it, hold it real firmly like this. And what you're doing is you're going in one motion, just like this. You're not sawing like this. You're sort of just dragging it over. And again, this is an area that you're going to take time and some patience, and you'll see the high spots wherever there's any high spots. You can kind of see I've got one slight low spot there, and I probably will work that down to where it's perfectly flat. But once you get it to where you want it, just stop, and then you're good to go. In regards to butt pads, what I use is Kickies. There's lots of different butt pads. I get these out of Brownells, or about 40 bucks or whatever. And but this pad in itself sort of has a recoil, or perception of a reduced recoil. And the ones I use is this 301 10 LB. And I like the large ones. And what the large ones allow me to do is it gives me plenty of overage on my buttstock, to where then I can grind these down. Like I said, you're just going to sand these down to fit, and it's pretty easy to, pretty easy stuff to work with. So that's butt pads.